Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for tuning in to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today. We have with us Miriam Rachael Freed, who is a business and creative leadership coach. She is a seasoned coach with 14 years of experience as a consultant, leader, and entrepreneur, holding 12 certifications across life coaching, subconscious reprogramming, trauma-informed nervous system regulation, and effective teaching. She guides creatives and entrepreneurs to unlearn fear, anxiety, perfectionism, and self-sabotage, empowering them to build profitable and impactful businesses and lives that they love. Miriam, welcome to the show.
Chris, thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you here. Before we do dive into the nitty gritty and the good stuff, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
This is so fun. I have gone through multiple possible answers here. I'll name that as a kid growing up, I really enjoyed sketching Bugs Bunny. Like I could do it in 5 seconds and I just thought it was really cool that I could do that. But, Superwoman kind of really, I love her. So that feels authentic, potentially like a Sailor Moon kind of energy. Could also be a vibe. There may be some Tasmanian devil that lives in me also, maybe a little roadrunner in moments. So I'm answering as a conglomerate of different characters that all potentially speak to me. If you had to make me choose one, I'd most propel to Superwoman or the Little Mermaid Okay, now we're really there. Yeah, fun question.
Okay, no, I like that. And I mean, I like that you take many different facets from different characters as well. I like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Miriam, why don't you tell me, what is procrastination to you? How do you define it? And what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah. I think I want to answer it through the perspective of when I find myself and or my clients procrastinating the most. And often like the pattern that I see is the thing that we know could get us to the next level is often the thing that we have the most resistance around. So procrastination to me is often the impact of like either unprocessed fear or the impact of this is a different direction, or the impact of doing too much. Like if you're already capped and you add more to your plate, it can be like, you can tell yourself internally that it's procrastination, but it may just be overwhelm. It may be that there's too much going on. So it's one of those two ends for me of either fear that we need to address and just take raw action with a big open heart, or it's like, hey, you're trying to do too much and we need to scale back so that you can prioritize what's most important to you.
No, I like that for sure. And I mean, it certainly goes into that realm with the overwhelm, taking on too much, the people pleasing and I like to call it not my circus, not my monkey.
Yeah.
So sometimes people take on things that really aren't theirs. So they're overwhelming because how can you know how to do something that's not technically yours to do?
Yeah. I think too, like a lot of the people who I work with are multi-passionate creatives. And so you have potentially like 5 moving projects at once and you're juggling everything and trying to do everything at once. And it's just not really a sustainable model for living a day-to-day life. And then the internal is this like shame and beat up that can happen because you're like, why aren't I farther in this piece? Or why aren't I prioritizing this thing? And you can tell yourself that you're putting it off. You can tell yourself that it's procrastination. But really what's happening is like what you're procrastinating is probably your own self-care and your own space to get some perspective. And that's vulnerable. So I think another edge of procrastination has to do with building that intimacy with yourself, that vulnerability with some pieces of you that maybe feel a little scary to tap into. Yeah.
I like that. And we all know that there's no real silver bullet, so to speak.
Yeah.
But what would be your secret sauce for overcoming procrastination?
Yeah. I'm really big on systems. So like we're just past the new year now. So I can even start from that wide of a view. At the start of a year, I'm like, okay, what are the big things that I'm focusing on this year? And being realistic with myself of like, okay, am I trying to write a book and start a podcast and build this program and scale my revenue and right, like, which is where I had been Like I have definitely entered that place before. Or am I starting from like, okay, here are my like top 3 priorities, and I'm making sure it's balanced in different areas of my life. It's not all business. It's not all health. It's like, it's really taking a balanced perspective. And then once I'm clear on those priorities, then I'm like, okay, now what does my month look like? How does it feel to look at this month? Is my body already in trigger? Does it already feel too big, too much? Because if it does, even in just the planning process, it's a sign I'm going to procrastinate stuff. Like I'm going to put it off because I'm going to be in that overwhelm tap out. From my month, I have a weekly process goal. And then I can show you. Yeah. Like people who can see the video. This is like one of my, it's like a Bible tool for me where I have these 4 quadrants. I use this every day. It has pleasure first. So the first quadrant is like, what am I doing to take care of myself? That has to happen first, especially if I don't want to procrastinate. I need to take care of me. The second is around my business tasks. So like things that I'm like, yes, done or not, check off the list. This is for my schedule, my time. So like any meetings I have go here. I'm not combining the task list and my schedule together. That's, I think, can be overwhelming. And then the last is around my health. So I have these different moving pieces and I'm like, oh, wow, I actually can see how these interplay with each other. And it feels really good to check stuff off. And I feel on top of my game and it makes me really happy. I know I'm prioritizing myself in ways that matter and keep me sustained. And so that's an example of a type of system that's really high. It's been really high leverage for me and it's really high leverage for the people I work with.
No, I definitely like that. Putting yourself first. I mean, a lot of times we don't hear that a lot because it's called selfish, or the buzzword of I feel like the buzzword of 2023 was narcissism for some reason.
Yeah, I would agree that word has been coming up more and more. Yeah.
And it's funny because I did a lot of I actually know a narcissist, clinical one.
Yeah.
And it's a couple of things you have to realize about it too is that there's literally 0.1% of the population are going to actually fall into that category.
Yeah.
And then the second thing you have to realize is that we have to admit, or we have, well, I'm sorry, we don't have to admit, we have to acknowledge the part that we played in that, or well, not we, but society or family or their environment played into that, right? It's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people who want to make the world a better place, who want to make impact, can be so afraid of being too selfish, can be so afraid of putting themselves first, can be so afraid of the judgment of even like success, really, because like building wealth, for example, I have clients who want to have financial freedom, but there's a lot of shade culturally around people with money that really exists. And it's some pieces for us to navigate. But something that my coach said that I think is so true, like if you're worried about being a narcissist, it's a great sign that you're not one, because narcissists aren't worried about being narcissists. They're not aware that way. And I was like, oh, that's a really helpful perspective to hold. Yeah. I think too, I kind of live in plant metaphors. And I think, if each of us is a plant, if each of us was born to bloom in some way, the best thing that you can do, not only for yourself, but for the planet, is to be as healthy and strong and vibrant as possible. And that you taking care of yourself literally is a way that you help heal the world, let alone then the fruit you can bear or the bees that can come pollinate or whatever it is that kind of continues off of that. But you being healthy and strong is your number one job.
I like that. I definitely like that. Why don't we shift a little bit into your background and your journey and sort of how you got to be where you are today?
Yeah. So I really struggled in mental health as a teen, and I was not the type of quote unquote the type of person who that would necessarily be obvious. I was very involved in my school. I got most school spirited, senior class president, but I really felt something was I really struggled. And in that growth, I also started to become aware of things in the world that felt really messed up. Like, I'm like, why aren't we learning about I didn't quite have the language for it then. So I'll offer the language I have now through my own journey. Like, why don't we have more people learning how to do things that actually help the planet? Why aren't I really learning about how my mind works? Like, why aren't we talking about mental health? Like, so all of these pieces started to come in, and I've always been a creative person, and I've always been good at math, and I like money. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to business school. I want to start a business to make the world a better place. And I got to business school and I'm like, I am not a corporate person. Like, that was definitely the energy of the space. And I was really looking for people who were like me, like just wanted to make the world better, like make massive income and impact to change the world. And I wasn't finding it. And so when I graduated business school and started getting more into my own healing, I decided to get into public education. And so I taught high school math for 6 years and grew in leadership. And that's where my healing really began. My language is always education was my first spiritual teacher. And I'm so grateful for my students. I am so grateful for the leaders that I worked with. It was truly like, we talk about reparative work and we talk about transformation. And it changed my life in every way I could have asked for. And it was really hard for me to transition out of the education space because of how grateful I was and how much it moved me. I think ultimately as I was growing in leadership, I'm like, I don't want to be a principal. Like, I've learned what I can learn here, and I still want my own business. And I still really want to help people to do what they love and to be who they are. And that was the energy I'm giving to kids all day. And so you keep giving that all day. It's like, wow, I also need to live that myself. And so that was the bridge of my transition to deepening my studies around the subconscious mind, the nervous system, trauma, and then continuing onward to start my business.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely an interesting journey there. And there's a few things that I'd like to go into a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned that was really interesting to me too is the education system right now is not, well, it's getting better. I have to admit that they're trying. It's slow. There's red tape. There is more mental health stuff going on because they realize it's important. The reasons why it wasn't really a priority before is because schools are not designed to create free thinkers. Schools are not designed to create or have space for creatives or entrepreneurs or even people that are going to impact anything. Schools are designed to get you to learn how to learn and also how to interact with people in a setting where you've got a set set of rules and a set of expectations. That's all it is. What that's going to evolve to in the future, I don't know. I'm hoping they put more emphasis on mental health because, well, even now I'm noticing in my own daughter's school, right? In kindergarten, they start with the little faces, right? Oh, this is happy, this is sad, this is angry. How are you feeling? And then I don't know. I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but after, I think it was personally when I was going through school, we didn't have any of that. Then when my daughter was going through school after first grade, like at first grade, it's like they stopped. That's it.
Yeah.
And now they're kind of trying to rapidly bring it back. But it's going to be a long process for sure. You must have had a lot of challenge. You said it's very challenging. I imagine that many of us can relate. What do you think was your biggest challenge?
I think my biggest challenge was loving myself. Like, is probably the cleanest way to sum that up. I don't know if the language is really self-aware. I wasn't aware that I had the power to change how I thought about myself. I wasn't aware that, like, I was a lot heavier as a teen, and I hit a point in college where I just kind of dropped the weight. And I remember my cousin being like, what happened? Like, what did you do? And I had no answer other than I started treating myself better. And my house growing up was not, it looked good. So similar to the energy I was giving off, it looks good. Like, you're checking all the boxes, but it was not good inside. Like, it just was not. And so I also I was born in the Bronx, and then I moved to a county just north, which was more affluent. And so I felt the difference of my privilege and my lifestyle. And so internally, I'm like, I should be so happy. I should be so grateful. I have nothing to complain about. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, I'm not happy. So it was also permission. I think what was hard for me is also, and this again is like the intimacy and vulnerability within oneself, like admitting to myself what my true emotional experience was. Because if I couldn't admit it, if I couldn't name it, I definitely couldn't change it. And so it took me until my late 20s, early 30s to even realize that I was depressed. Like I didn't even know that that was what was happening because it was just my normal.
No, and thanks for sharing. That is something that's normal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Again, just because like we aren't, we don't focus too much on feelings, and then if we do, it's like, oh, I'm being a burden, or
Yeah.
you're being a buzzkill, or um you don't need to have a right to complain, and all this other things. And we get that a lot. We get that a lot in the first world, for sure. I spent a lot of time in Central America, Latin America. You spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I imagine there's a lot of parallels to the ways of life and the way that people think, right? And it's not about complaining. It's about, again, it's about gratitude, but it's also about, you have the right to, now my words are failing me. You have the right to expand and to grow to your utmost capacity, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of times we feel guilty. I deal with this myself every day.
Mm.
I know that there are people that, well, even in my own family, compared to them, I'm very, very like super on the other side of royalty or whatever, right? But and it's hard, right? Because you do feel like,
Yeah. You're speaking to two places of guilt. It's like the guilt and shame around the negative stuff, right? Like saying what's hard, and then the guilt and shame around saying what's good. Like one of the spaces that I facilitate is for a group of women. One of my signature programs is called Clear, Confident, Dope as Fuck. Sorry, I cursed. And is my vibe. In the calls, we celebrate. We do public celebrations. And it takes a long time to build comfort to take up space in a positive way, right? Like, because there's guilt and shame around that too. Like for I shouldn't say even for me, but for me, a lot of my journey, I recently, almost a year ago now, six months to a year ago, I joined a mastermind. And in that space, people are sharing, they're bragging, they're celebrating, they're saying the good things. And every single time I would come to share, I immediately would start crying. Like I couldn't, and now it's changed. There's a lot of shedding that had to happen, a lot of trust in sisterhood and womanhood that had to happen. But it was really scary for me to shine, And over the course of the process, as that's transformed, like so is my business, so has my life. I think all is happening at one time. I wouldn't say that's the one thing that shifted, but it definitely is a piece. Yeah. You said something earlier that I don't want to lose around schools and creativity. And I think still the number one TED Talk is Sir Ken Robinson. I think I'm saying that name right. Do schools kill creativity? Number one, like for years and years and years has been the number one. So if you're listening and you haven't listened to that, it's a really good talk. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. And you talk about the fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fear is so interesting to me because I've been on my own journey, and I'm sure, and I'd like to hear your perspective on it too, especially since you were in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
and you had those teachings. So the main idea is that when we're talking about fears, we're really talking about attachments to things, whether that's attachment to some form of identity or attachment to some sort of outcome. What do you think is kind of the base fear? Do you think it's more the fear of success, or is it more like the quote unquote witch wound, the fear of being judged that holds us back?
Let me think about that. Is there one? I think the ultimate fear for people is dying without having done what they knew they could. Like if I were to give an ultimate, I think that may be it. I think there's all of the fears that come from being able to die knowing that you did everything that you wanted, that you could. That's like, it's like the web around that. Yeah.
Well, there's also, I think, the fear of not making the right choice sometimes.
Yeah. 100%. I think it's all, yeah. There's the fear of not making the right choice. There's the fear of judgment. There's the fear of public shaming. There's the fear of making a mistake. There's the fear of, like change. Like you may say something 5 years ago that now you've learned different and better. And now you're saying something else. And it's like, wait, am I still myself? Like, uh-oh, you know?
Yeah, I did all my mistakes before social media. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's like fear. There's fear of the unlived life, and then there's fear of living life fully and everything that connects to both of those things. Often we get so caught in the fear of like the fears that are like worst case scenario kind of fears. Like we kind of stay in that place. I think the next level up is allowing yourself to hit the fears of what if it all worked out? Like, can you allow yourself enough space to really imagine the best case scenario so that you can address some of the fears there? Because often we don't even realize what resistance we have. Like for my clients who are growing their businesses, it's like, well, my schedule, like didn't realize that this was coming up. They want to get to like 20K months, 25K months. And they're not even realizing that like, oh my God, if I want to do that, it means my schedule is going to be too full. I won't have time for myself. I'm going to have more things to pay for. So it won't even be worth the extra. Like, you know, there's all these stories going on that we don't even realize are there because we're so focused on like, no one's going to sign up or like, no one's going to want to invest with me. Right. And it's like, okay, well, like what else is going on? Yeah.
Actually, that runs into a pretty interesting question that I had, and I wonder what your perspective is. I know that there's two conflicting ideas right now that I have, right?
Yeah.
So the first one is that, you know, universe all expansive. We're supposed to expand as much as we can within our, you know, capabilities and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's also this idea of enough, right? So, you know, we have those numbers in our head, but we also don't, like you said, we don't take into account, you know, extra things or extra time. So is that a helpful tool to sort of, you know, first of all, put at enough and then analyze around like, why is that enough? And then try to move those plans around, or how do you?
Can you give me an example?
Right. So, as an example, I've coached people that dealt with guilt because, you know, their goal was to have 5 cars in a mansion. And my comeback to that is, okay, is that your enough? Because I've personally been in the situation. I didn't go down that road, but personally, I've been in the situation where I've had the goal, I've hit the goal, and then I just kept going with complete disregard for anything else I had laid out. And then it just went,
Yeah. Yeah. I think what that speaks to for me is a few things. One is like allowing yourself, this is a learn it. I think there's no, it's not, I'm going to say these things and I'm also going to name that sometimes you just have to learn some things. And like, there's no amount of pre-planning that can like help you to not learn the lesson that you got to learn. So I'll name that. I think there is something to be said for pace and just being conscious of I'll use your language of enough. Is the enough that I'm building for, like for the highest good of all and for the highest good of myself? Like, does it feel in alignment and deep integrity for me? Am I moving at a pace where I'm really checking in of like, is this the lasting impact I want to make for myself? Is this the lasting impact I want to make for the world? And I think that can kind of curb in a way some of the rush, some of the pressure, some of the urgency, some of the more, you're never full, never done, Donald Duck kind of like, right. Yeah, I think that. Yeah.
and just talking about impacts for a second. I know from my own perspective that you know, I've had plans that I put off that, you know, wanted to be make an impact. And one of the things about wanting to make an impact for many people too is sometimes they get really discouraged because it depends on the level of impact that you want to make. And sometimes we decide to put things off because we see other people who have tried similar things and it's just not making the change. So I'm interested in your perspective. How do you approach something where, again, you want to make the impact, But realistically, the kind of impact you're trying to make, I mean, if we're talking big things like, like Greenpeace or like, I don't know, UNICEF maybe, these are things that are multi-generational. Like really, there's no way that like in your lifetime, sure, you can see some impact, but I think you have to define those impacts as smaller impacts. Is that correct? Or would you still go with, oh, I'm going to change, this?
I think there's a few different ways to think about it. The big word that comes to mind for me in that question is integrative. Like, I think that the impact is inherently a part of your business. So I'm thinking of a artist client of mine right now, and she's really, really passionate about ethical sourcing. And so then that gets to be a part of her content. That gets to be a part of her conversation. Also, in terms of pricing her art, it means that the art that she's asking people to invest in, or like that she's offering for people to invest in, is art that they would keep for life, right? It's not something that they get from TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and then when they change homes, they're like, I don't need it anymore. It's like a really intentional investment that's going to carry with you because it speaks to you, because it means something to you. So that to me is already creating an environmental impact just inherently in the core of how the business is run. There's other businesses that may not be as product based. Right? So that may be like you're already allocating in your debt to income that like you have X% that's perpetually going to some sort of donations. It could be having some freelance work that you're contributing to an organization that you really love. It could just be like you're amplifying other organizations that you're really passionate about. I think it can look really different for so many people. There is a reciprocal relationship that needs to, like, it needs to fuel you to give too. Otherwise, it doesn't feel good. And it's kind of like the energy isn't clean. So clean energy around it is really important. But there is a way for it to be already enmeshed in your way of doing business and how you approach business. The other edge I'd offer for bigger things, wow, like my big dream is to create, like I think about this all the time. It's not top of my list, but it will come as it comes. How do I really transform garbage? Like, what are the different pathways to really transforming garbage and making it not go into landfills? Like, and that's a lingering question. I'm never going to answer that. I mean, I shouldn't never say never. It's likely that I'm not going to answer that by myself. And so it's just like, hey, I'm open to potentially meeting the right people, having the right conversations, knowing that like this is going to come in as I keep my heart open and my mind clear, like that there's going to be a way for me to contribute for environmentalism in a way that like really lights me up. So both and you don't have to do it alone, and do what you can do on your own in a way that feels really in integrity for you.
I really love that example you just gave, because sometimes what happens too is we're trying to find a perfect solution.
Yeah.
And there really isn't one, because when you're talking garbage, I mean, when you're talking recycling too, there's a really good documentary right now out on Netflix. What is it? Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy.
Yeah.
And it's like, these are things that we know,
Yeah.
but, we don't really admit to. So, I mean, one of the things that you can look at too is if you want to change garbage in itself, right? We just start small, and we do the ripple effect, because those ripples can be huge.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I just in my head right now, I did like 10 things. I'm sure you've done it too, right? Like, what do we do with garbage? Oh, well, we can use it to power something, right? Well, okay, you're still, because the landfills are just burning it anyway, right? So we could do that, but you're still kind of polluting. Okay, we could, recycle. Recycling. Again, that's too big a topic to get into on this show, but recycling is not what people think it is either.
100%.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
That's a clean word for it. Yeah. Generous word. Yeah. It is so infinite. Like, it could be just how you, like, I grocery shop with my reusable bags, like my cloth bags. And so I'll share that. Right. So it's like these small little things that you can do that just represent who you are, what you care about. Like, that to me is impact. You being who you are and doing your best and sharing yourself, like, that has impact. Yeah.
What would you say is no, I have an interesting question for you. And I love this question because it's going to give the listener some insight too. What is the thing that you have done in your life that you thought would have no impact at all, but actually had a very big impact?
I think there have been, my mind goes in two directions. One is I think that there have been really subtle moments of kindness or like positive feedback that I've offered in a way that just felt like obvious to me or just normal to me, that then I find out has like really meant something to somebody. Similar, I really love writing, and I often write cards that make my friends cry because I love them so much. And so like that's just me being myself. Like I'm just putting my heart out here. And so I think that like words and energy, you may not think have big impact, but they do. I think the where else my brain went was one of the things that was scariest for me to do at the time that I knew needed to be done, that I wanted to make an impact for, was when I was teaching. And this was my last year teaching. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to lead differently. I brought meditation into, so I was teaching in the South Bronx, students who had been repeating Algebra 1 multiple years, like were not vibing math, right? It was not the energy. And so I brought I called it the MVP, which stands for most valuable player, or my varying personality. And I was like, we need to check in with ourselves first before we're ready to learn something new. It also just helped give me a baseline of where they were at. And we would meditate in class. And this was like not common. Like maybe it's more common now, but honestly, I don't even really think so. I haven't seen high school math classes really doing this. And there was a day that the superintendent was visiting and he was coming into my class because I'm really good at what I do. And I was like, am I still going to do the MVP? Like, am I still going to have them meditate? Even though like, I don't know what this guy's going to think. Like he may be like, this is a waste of time. And he really loved it. And I was like, whoa, that is so cool. That is so cool that my kids love it. They still think about it. I got an email from a student like pretty recently talking about how like that mindset work really made such a difference in their life. I was like, wow, that's amazing to hear. Yeah.
I really love that too. And so many of us are afraid to do things because of what people might think, or because one of the things I get a lot of, actually, I don't know if you've experienced a similar, is when somebody's in a job, they're so worried about keeping that job that it prevents them from actually doing the job they were hired to do.
Yeah, I think that can happen also in early entrepreneurship. You're so caught up in doing a good job and how other people are thinking of you and like, is it good enough? And that you actually are like blocking your own creativity. You're blocking your own insights. You're blocking your own wisdom. Yeah.
Actually, it's Mel Robbins actually has a book out. Dang it, it was just referenced today. About not to how to move forward without thinking about what other people think.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really a really good book. I don't have the name of it in front of me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I do something similar. Like,
Yeah.
I know everybody likes to get festive and stuff, but I'm the one that like, I'm not doing it now, obviously, but I have like a duck hat that's got the little flippers, and when you squeeze the thing, the feet, it flaps out like that. So I'll just go out. If I feel like I'm getting too serious about myself or I'm taking myself too seriously, I'll
Yeah.
put that on. I'll just go wave at people.
Love that.
And
Yeah.
it just because again, nobody gets out alive, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you might as well not take yourself too seriously, because the ego gets in the way of it, gets in the way a lot too.
Yeah. I have been thinking so much about how to infuse more play this year in all of what I do. I think the energy that you create from, whether it's sending an email or building a project, right? Like the energy that you're creating from is inherently the energy that goes into it. And so how can it like more play, more pleasure, more joy, more rest, more like, what does the world need? What do I need? And give that. Yeah.
What's really interesting about that is, the energy you put in is what you get out. If you're sitting there typing an email with your middle fingers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the language can be fine. The language can be just fine. But
Yeah.
what's really interesting, and I witnessed this actually where one of the places I used to work, and I typed a few emails with my middle fingers. I'll admit it. And I used exactly the same language. Okay,
Yeah.
exactly the same language,
Yeah.
exactly the same words.
Yeah.
But with the clients that I didn't do that with, they're like that, I kind of liked, I was using the same language. I didn't change anything.
Yeah.
Emojis weren't allowed, no smiley faces, no semicolons, no, hey or whatever. It was all very strict.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the person on the other end, even though they'd never spoken to me, probably picked up those middle finger vibes
Yeah.
because that's what I got back.
Yeah. It's so real. It's so real. Yeah. Same as fear. Like if you're sharing stuff and you're afraid of rejection, if you're sharing stuff and you're like, I don't think anyone's going to actually want it, but like I'm going to put it out there anyway. It's like, all right, well, don't be surprised when people don't come to you because you just got to like I let your heart be open. Be ready to receive. I was in the car the other day and I'm I'm big on audiobooks. And I was listening to this audiobook it's around money, but but more spiritual in a way that I've sort of heard, but haven't heard. And one of the parts was talking to say out loud, I'm open to receive, or I'm ready to receive. And I'm in my car and I'm like, I'm ready to receive. And I'm like, no, you're not. Your heart is closed right now. You are not ready to receive. You can say the words, but if you don't feel it in your body, like you're blocking yourself. And that was really great data for me. And I was like, all right, what is going on right now that I am closing myself off? Like this is really, really interesting. And this is where I love how the nervous system and our subconscious mind like interplay with each other. Because when you have a regulated nervous system and when you have your subconscious mind working for you, like there is nothing that you can't do. Like literally, there's nothing you can't do. Yeah.
Oh no, for sure. I always like to say, I don't go into the different practices or anything. The only thing I will say, and this is the only
Yeah.
thing that anyone's ever going to hear me say when it comes
Yeah.
to religion, mysticism, alchemy,
Yeah.
is that, or Scientology, even atheism, is that everyone is essentially saying the same thing. They're
Yeah.
just using different words, and
Yeah.
then they're arguing about which words to use.
Yeah. At the core, it's love. I think that's yeah. At the core, it's love.
It's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. Yeah.
Anyway, Miriam, this has been a great conversation. We are coming up pretty close to the time here. Is there anything that you feel I should have asked but didn't ask, or anything that we should have covered that we didn't cover?
Love that question. I don't think so. This was a really fun conversation.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I guess I do have one last question before we go, just for
Yeah.
our listeners. How can people best reach out and get in touch with you in case they have questions or maybe want to work with you or learn
Yeah.
more?
Absolutely. My website, my Instagram, that's where I'm most active. Trying to get back on LinkedIn is Miriam Rachael Freed, AEL and Rachel. So you can send me a message. You could drop me an email. I have a couple freebies on my website if you want to get in. One of the things I'm putting out within the week is a walking meditation that's really more like a walking inspiration. So if you're like, hey, I'm enjoying listening to your voice and your energy, it's a really good one. So you can get that for free soon. I have strategy calls if one-on-one coaching is something that you're interested in, and a couple of group programs opening up within the quarter. Yeah, I'd love to connect with you in any way that feels good.
Excellent. And just a notice, as usual, to our listeners, don't worry about grabbing a pen and paper. We are going to put those in the show notes for you.
Awesome.
And once again, thank you for tuning in and listening. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just try and go out and be that inspiration or motivation for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Chris.